Hello, everybody. This is Max speaking from the Netherlands. I am one of the initiators of Poppi, a new drug museum that we're trying to build here in the Netherlands as a startup. So we don't have a fixed location yet, but of course the ambition is there to build up a museum in a fixed location in Amsterdam. And the topic would be drugs. We think this is an important topic, very urgent in society in the Netherlands, as it's one of the key producers of drugs like MDMA and crystal meth at the moment, and a transport hub for heroin and cocaine. We see more drug-related crimes lately, and we have large groups of people who use drugs in the Netherlands, of course, like every other country. So we found it's time to found a museum about this topic. And we're slowly building this, and one of the things that we want to address in the museum is the regulation of MDMA, and that's the topic of today's session. So what is going on with MDMA in the Netherlands? Well, we have over 1 million users of MDMA, or at least people who have ever used MDMA in their lifetime, so ecstasy. But we are also a key producer in the world of ecstasy. And this is becoming more and more of a problem. It takes a lot of police capacity. There's a lot of crime associated with the production of ecstasy. And society sees a lot of drug dumpings. So environmental damage is also an issue in the country. And this has led, of course, to some wild public debates and people thinking, like, how can we better come to solutions, and how can we create better policies for MDMA? Now, there's been a lot of talk about trying to regulate this drug. Our politicians are not there yet. It's not a topic that's on the agenda, but there's been a lot of debate about it. And there's been a group of researchers that have sort of researched the different policy options, how to deal with MDMA in 2020, sorry. And they advise, based on quite a thorough analysis, that regulating MDMA would actually be a better policy option with better outcomes in terms of health, safety, and environmental, less damage, let's say. The interesting question for a museum like us, or let's say individuals with an interest in drugs, is if you would do that, assuming that politicians would take the risk to regulate MDMA, what would the world look like then? Now, we have some interesting indications of that. For example, in a report that Transform from the UK published last year about how to regulate stimulants. And it's actually a really detailed guide of how you could do that. But to imagine a world where you can buy regulated MDMA is still something sort of futuristic. And with Poppi, we want to try to give this, this thought experiment, let's say, some hands and feet. And we want to engage the general public better and more in this discussion. So hopefully at some point, when more people are aware of the different policy options, of the option that you can actually decide as politicians to regulate stimulants like MDMA, to see if we can also increase the pressure on politicians to take this topic to a political level. And because the public, of course, they don't know all the details, ins and outs of what it would mean to do this, we want to create sort of a fun way to engage people with this topic. And that's how the idea came about, to make a serious game where people can actually play a game, get in touch with this issue, and form their opinion about it. And also to let us know under what circumstances and conditions they would find it acceptable to buy regulated MDMA in a shop. My colleague Rafa will talk a bit more about this game. And today in the session, you'll also get the chance to play the game and then later give us feedback so we can actually improve it. So what we have today is a prototype, and we are really keen to hear everyone's input to improve it, make it more realistic, more user-friendly, and more effective. So that's the purpose of today's session. That's the end of my introduction, and I'm going to hand it over now to Rafaela, my colleague who has been working on this quite long. Take it away, Rafa.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Mac. Nice to be here with you and to talk about this topic. So as Mac was telling you, this idea of the game started about 3 years ago. when we were talking about that, also with a group of researchers at Utrecht University that were coming from very different backgrounds. So we had criminologists, historians, people from psychology, neuroscience, cultural studies, and we were wondering how to engage the public into this debate. And then soon we got doing game research, both from information sciences and culture studies, and with Pop to start producing a game. So we started brainstorming how to build a game. And first we started actually with the idea of a board game. So we were for about a year building sort of cards game that we could play and discuss how would it be, what are the problems. So the idea, we were working back then with different models. So prohibition as we have now, to regulation, to full liberalization. And we were proposing in these cards that people would think about what are the advantages and the problems that come with with each of these models, and then putting people to discuss. And the idea was also to build this game together with non-game experts. So we invited law enforcement workers, people who use ecstasy and other drugs, and also care workers to discuss with us how to do that. Then soon we thought, now we would like to do something go a bit further and try to take this to an online version. And luckily we got to do that starting this year with a group of students from Utrecht University that will soon be presenting to you the demo that we have so far. And for this version, we decided to abandon the idea of prohibition completely. We thought that, okay, that's enough being discussed about the failure of drug prohibition. And with this game, we want to take this further to focus only on regulation and how this would happen, how this could happen. And the way we are trying to have this game now is is twofold. So one is to create awareness into how what are the possibilities of regulation. Two is to ask the players to give their feedback on how they think this could be possible. And then test also the acceptance of models, and which model would be more acceptable to public. So we are using the previous work done by Transform into how we regulate stimulants and MDMA more specifically, and also the work that Mac mentioned from this think tank group that is thinking about how it would be better to produce to regulate MDMA. So we are working on, let's say, different criteria, suppose age limits, the dosage of pills that people would be able to buy, the quantity of pills people would be able to buy, if they would get advice or not, if health insurance would be paying for pills or not. And so we are trying to build this in the game where we have 3 different sceneries where people could potentially buy MDMA. One is a pharmacy, one is a smart shop, and the other is a party setting. So for now, we only have still a demo of the pharmacy that we would like to show you, and you can also try. It is still at a very early stage, so we are humble here to ask for your feedback, and also this is not to say this is not a ready product. So we are really willing to build this also with your help to see how you think this could be better developed, and we are very interested in hearing your feedback. I think that's it about research, just to say. So we are trying to attach into this game a research part, which is looking into the acceptance of regulation in different environments, and also getting input of the players on what would be the best environment, what would be more accepted for regulation of MDMA. And we do that by asking if the player allows us to record their steps in the game, so their decisions on what they prefer. And we have a few questions at the end also where we ask them in general, their opinion. For now, you will see only the part of the pharmacy, but at the end, when we have all the other scenes, there would be more questions also attached to that. So that's the basic idea around the game, and I would like now to pass on to Luca Millers, who is one of the students representing the whole group of students at Utrecht University, to show you the game, to introduce you to the group, how they are working, and how the game is.
Yes, thank you, Rafaela. So as you mentioned, I'll be representing the team Code Cartel. We're a group of 13 students. We're working on the serious game that was introduced. We have 11 students from Utrecht University, awesome artists that have been working a lot on making this game as beautiful as it can be. So yeah, as Rafaela mentioned as well, we will be showing you the pharmacy scene today. It's one of the 3 scenes that will be in the final game, together with the smart shop and the party scene. So without further ado, let's get into the game. So you should be able to see now, it says Ecstasy Buying Simulator. And we'll get into the controls. Once you'll be able to play for yourselves, which will be after my brief talk, you can read through the controls. I will just ignore these for a while. So as for the data, I will decline because, of course, I know the game very well. But for all the people that would be willing to fill in the survey at the end, please click on accept. We would love to hear your feedback and gather some of your insights. So this is the game as it starts up. It's a small pharmacy. You can walk around using the arrow keys or WASD. And yeah, it's a cute little pharmacy. There's some areas to be seated. There's a place to buy the things that you buy in the pharmacy. There's some drugs. There's some hand lotion. There's a bit of everything. So there's our pharmacist over there behind the computer. And yeah, what you can do is you can walk up certain objects and you can inspect them. For example, here's a table, which is for a children's waiting section where young children can play while their parent or caretaker talks to the pharmacist. So of course, this warns you about the fact that children should not take ecstasy. This is a very trivial thing to us, but it's good to keep people informed. Now, there's also other things in the pharmacy that you can interact with. For example, these flyers. They don't contain any information on ecstasy yet. We will get into that later. Because if you press space, here are the rules that Rafaela talked about. So the part of this game is that you're able to customize the rules that are set by the, so to say, government, right? So you can, for example, select the limit of pills that someone can buy. Let's say we want people to be able to buy 2 pills legally. We can click on pills and we can change it to 2 pills. So for example, for the flyers, what we can do is we can say, right now there's no advice that's mandatory when you buy ecstasy, but we can force the pharmacy to give positive advice. And if we go back to the flyers that are shown here, we can see that now the flyer gives the user positive advice about taking ecstasy or MDMA, right? So only take drugs with responsibility when you feel well. Don't use it when you're alone. Use it during the weekends, etc. So these flyers are informative about this way of approaching the settings is that the environment changes as you adjust the settings. For example, what you might see, I'll zoom in on the posters real quick, is that if there's no advice, there will be no posters. But if you have positive advice, there will be positive posters. And if you have negative advice, there will be negative advice. For example, here it says drug use is never safe. So another way where, another place where we can see how the environment changes is in this box. Here it shows the price, the age, and the dosage, and also the number of pills that you can buy. So let's say we change the price to, let's say, 12.5 euros, you can see that the price actually changes to 12.5 euros. And this also changes how you can talk to the pharmacist. So this is an important aspect of our game. You can talk to the pharmacist, and it would just pop up with a small dialogue where you can ask to buy ecstasy. So they ask you to see your ID to make sure that you're above the age limit that you've selected. In our case, it's 18 years old, so I'll go ahead and show it. So then we need to be registered into the system. Now, of course, you can click no, but that will not give you any ecstasy. And that's the goal. We would like to buy some ecstasy, so we will register. So now we can select the number of pills. So we can actually buy 2 pills because, as you can remember, we set the legal limit to 2 pills. As well for the dosage, we can select 100 milligrams because that is the maximum dosage that we had selected. So let's say this is our time. We have not taken this dosage before. Then you can see that the pharmacist will give us some advice. Specifically, they will advise us to take half of the pill first. And if everything goes well, then 1.5 hours later, we can take the rest of the pill. So this is, of course, all to raise awareness for the harm reduction aspect of taking MDMA, and to make sure that everyone has a pleasant and safe experience. So there's more advice to drink enough water. There's also, honestly, keep yourself hydrated. That's very important. And furthermore, then the pharmacist will actually get you the pills. So the advice is given before you get your pills. You can see the pharmacist goes to the back and then returns to the counter to give you your pills. Here they are. And there's some more information on the flyers, which we'll take a look at soon after the dialogue. And of course, very important for the pharmacies as well, that in the prescription, every pill will come inside of a box, which has a prescription with possible side effects. Of course, all of this is again related to harm reduction. And they are very friendly and ask us if we have any questions. We can, of course, at any moment get in touch with them. So here's another flyer that the pharmacist just printed for us, which advises us not to sell our pills to others, because that's not what we're supposed to do. That's why there's a legal limit, and that's why we have to come to the pharmacist with our ID. So soon you will be able to play the game for yourself. You will be able to try and test everything out. There's a lot more things that you can interact with. All of them contain useful information. You can interact with these posters, which include which show the side effects. You can change the environment to an environment that you think is good, that is acceptable, and that would be realistically used for the legal sale of ecstasy. You can press Q in order to see everything that you can interact with. Everything will highlight for a bit. And once you're done with the game, you can walk to the door and click to leave the pharmacy. So this is the part where you will also get a short survey if you have accepted that. I have not, so I will just get a finish screen. But yeah, if at any point during you want to exit your browser, you can press escape, and then you will scan, and it will be no problem. That being said, let's get to playing the game. Let's see. So if someone could post the link to the game in the chat. Perfect. Thank you, Constellations team. And yes, go ahead, try it for yourself. I will be sticking around for a bit for those that are playing on their, that are watching the stream on their phone. Unfortunately, the game is only available for computer. So those that are on their phone, I will keep streaming. I will keep playing the game for a bit, explain some things, show you guys around a bit more, interact with a couple more items, and yeah, the rest enjoy. And so for everyone's information, you have about 15 minutes to play the game. So I will keep talking during the demo, during the demonstration for the phone users. But feel free to mute me and return in 15 minutes to play the game by yourself, undistracted, and explore for yourself. So as I showed before, here's a couple of flyers. These flyers change as you change the advice. And something really cool that we've added is that you can actually click on the poster to change it to another poster. So here's a plant. It contains some, when you eat it, it will provide you with some information about the production of ecstasy, because unlike some other drugs, ecstasy is very synthetic, and it's not naturally produced. So by the way, for any questions that come up in chat after you're able to play the game yourself. We will have a short panel where, of course, you can ask any questions that you'd like. There's going to be 2 experts that will talk as well. And yes, if you have any feedback, please feel free to contact us or to talk to us there. So, and for the one specific question about if we have considered how MDMA will be stored, as you can see here, it's not in the regular shelves. These only contain normal items, very specific items such as ecstasy. They should only be accessible to the pharmacist, who then has to hand them over to the buyer. This is also what originally the safes behind the pharmacist are for. And what you will see as well is if you talk to the pharmacist, then they will go to the back to get the ecstasy from the safes. So here it also talks about the fact that you have to register in order to buy ecstasy. This is true at least for the pharmacy scene that we've created. Other scenes, such as the smart shop and the party setting, may not have that because, of course, it's a bit harder to use a registration system when you're in a club. So again, this is where we can change the rules. If you click on the inspection sign, it will take you to the place in the scene where you can clearly see the differences. So, for example, changing the number of pills that you can legally buy will change the number of pills visible on the counter. The same goes for the price, and the advice, of course, will take you to the posters, which can be changed into negative posters, which warn the user about the dangerous side effects that ecstasy may have. Now, of course, what's important to note about the pharmacy scene is that there's never any advertisement for ecstasy. These are all informative tours that just explain the things that could happen when you take ecstasy. There's no, oh, take ecstasy because it's nice. It is just informing you about the positive and the negative effects of ecstasy. So very objective and neutral. And you can clearly see the difference between negative advice, which focuses on the negative effect that that ecstasy could have with regard to the positive advice, which not necessarily encourages users, but definitely helps them in their process of taking ecstasy. For example, here, this poster that we previously already saw encourages users to ask questions that they may have about ecstasy to professionals who are, of course, trained to do this. This is also visible over here with the medical license that's on the wall. Now, of course, this all may be in contrast to the bar scene or the club scene where people may be less formally trained. They are for sure not as well trained as pharmacists who have gotten a degree, but also undergone special training to sell ecstasy legally. And again, ecstasy is very regulated, which is why it's not visible anywhere in the regular shelves or on the regular parts of the shop. You must specifically talk to the pharmacist in order to buy ecstasy. So again, this is a great example of negative, let me go back, of negative advice, which informs the user that they shouldn't mix alcohol with drugs due to the unwanted effects that it may lead to. Here are some of the flyers that the pharmacist prints for us. This one we saw already in the brief demonstration beforehand, is that you should not sell your pills to your friends or your colleagues or whoever else might be with you, because that, of course, is not the point of having a system where you have to register. So let's set the rules. I think 2 pills is good, maybe 10 euros. It will not be covered by your health insurance. Let's say you can buy pills of 150 milligrams from the age 100 for 21. And let's see, let's do positive advice. So you can click on a pharmacist to talk.
Hi, Luca, I thought, or not anymore. Yes. Thanks a lot for
Yes, we hear you.
showing the game. Yes. Now, if we can all go to the Zoom chat, the Zoom call, sorry, that you have in the chat, then we can discuss a little bit more about the game and get your questions and impressions. So it would be nice if you can go to Zoom so we can have a more interactive session from now on. Now that you have either played yourself or have seen through what Lucas showed the game. Thanks.
Perfect.
And
Okay,
see you in
you heard
Zoom.
it. Let's all go to the Zoom. I have stopped sharing my screen, and the link should be in chat.
Shall I start? Does anyone else want to weigh in?
No, you can go.
I mean, I just to say, I thought it's brilliant. I mean, Luca and the team who did it, I think you've done a really. It's as a piece of interactive software, I think it's beautifully realized.
Thank you.
And I like the way that you can change the settings and it changes the details of the environment. I think that's really clever. Just to help people sort of think through what the implications of it are. And just the idea of a 3D environment that you can sort of explore and get a sense of what a legal drug shop would look like. And the fact is, it looks kind of like a pharmacy, which is, I think, going to be really interesting and reassuring for people. As I understand it, you're going to do some other models, like a more commercially oriented one and a smart shop one as well. And I think that's going to be really good because people can then go and look at them and explore them and just get a sense of what they are and relate it to their experience of different kind of retail environments. So I think as a concept and in terms of the realization, as a sort of educational, concept to stimulate the debate on this, I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I just think you've done a really, really good job. So I just want to say, well done. It's the first thing I want to say. I mean, I've got a few other sort of comments on details, but I don't know whether they're a bit too pedantic. I'm happy to throw them in if that's useful.
We are open for it.
Okay.
And if you don't want to say, we are open for it, but also for everyone, like if you played the game on your own and you got to the end, if you allowed us to record your answers at the end, you will get also to a part where we also ask feedback on the game. So
yeah, I think that's really good. I mean, I think and I think if you can tie it to a sort of some sort of research tool, whether you gather data off people who use the game, and then you can publish the findings of that in an academic paper or report or something. I think that's going to be really a useful way to inspire. And I think what would be really good is to get people who don't get it, not just people like us who are interested in these things, but people who are scared of the idea of regulation, politicians or conservative voices or anti-drug type people. Because they could go in and be, I think it would be quite reassuring that, that they would see this level of thought and consideration had gone into these things. And we're not just talking about selling MDMA and other drugs from sweet shops to children and all the rest of it. On just a couple of little details that jumped out at me. I think one, when you say you have to register and that there's a rationing system, I think it would be good to be clear, a little bit clear about what that is and what that means. Because I think a lot of people who use drugs are going to be quite anxious about giving their personal details over. And just because there's a rather sort of unpleasant history of drug user registries. So I think I would include with that some sort of hang on, I might even appear now. No, I might include some sort of reassurance about anonymity or encryption of personal details, because otherwise I think you're going to be putting people off. And there's a balance to be struck between the barriers to access and the need for regulatory controls to be put in. Because if the barriers are too big and the regulatory controls are too strict, people just won't use it. They'll default back to illegal markets. I think it might be quite useful to show some packaging mock-ups. Transform did some mock-up stuff in our regulation book. You'd be free to use that or maybe model something on that. So it could be good to show people what the package actually looks like. Because I don't think there's one thing, you've got like the display of the pills on the counter. I don't think you really need to show people a pill. People know what a pill looks like. I would have maybe a mock-up to the actual packaging that would have the health warnings on and it would look like a sort of pharmaceutical product, because that's what it is. The only other thing I noticed was in terms of the dosage options, 100 milligrams was the smallest dose, and I think 250 was the biggest. I think it might be because 100. Some people might not want to do 100 in one go. I mean, if you're smaller body size, smaller body mass, female, you might want to go for 70 or 80, or maybe do a bit and then redose. So I think 100 maybe is too smaller minimum unit. So I think in the Transform book we suggested something like that you would have 3 50-gram ones or 5 30-milligram pills, or you would have pills that could be easily split, like, you know, have a scoring, dividing, so you could sort of moderate and control your dosage a bit more precisely than 100-milligram units. So that was the only other thing that really jumped out at me. But basically, I think it's really, really good. Congratulations! It's delightful to see it, and I think it's going to be really, really useful. And I'm looking forward to seeing the other ones. I'll stop there. I could ramble on for ages, but I'm not going to.
Thanks. No, but thanks. That's really nice to hear. And we were thinking about having the packaging already, that you could actually get a pack of a box of MDMA, and we definitely looked into what you produced in Transform. But I'm looking at Luca. I think this is still something to be implemented in the future, right?
Yes, indeed. There's of course a lot of changes that are still going to happen. This is by no means the final product, but more of an impression of what we are working on and what's coming.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. I'm not being critical.
Yeah.
I was just trying to chuck in some helpful things.
No, that was clear.
Yes.
Thanks a lot for it. It's all very, very important input, and all things that we can make sure to integrate. Also, anonymity is very important to talk about that. Yeah, all of it. It's very important things. I mean, we have been. It looks like I have to say, during this process, I got respect for people producing games, because when you play a game, it sounds so simple and easygoing, but the process to produce it and to decide everything that goes on it and the rules of it, and how do you show this, it's a complex one and involves also different languages, like the game language, the language of different people looking at drugs in different perspectives. So we still have a long way to go, but all of this is super useful for us. So thanks. Yeah, I don't know if someone wants to please jump in. I saw in the chat other interesting suggestions that people said that we could have also condoms, gum, earplugs. I think there is one of the shelves that we are playing around with this idea. When you interact with the shelf, it says you can't buy ecstasy here because it's regulated, but you can buy all these other harm reduction items, and we list some of the items, but I think some of these items are not there. So it's thanks. We are going to make use of that. Also, Naomi asked how to store MDMA if we consider that. So I think that's what we were thinking so far. So in all these shelves that we have, we say that ecstasy is not displayed on those shelves, but we would store in this this box in front, but also in the lockers. But maybe we could make this more obvious somehow, to say that it's safe. Don't know what your thoughts on it are.
I suppose I'm fascinated. I did see that the boxes were kind of closed behind the counter. Just in terms of previous experience with, like, you know, the dispensing of controlled substances. Some countries in Eastern Europe and in Sub-Saharan Africa have gone so many levels above what the International Drug Control Conventions require. Like, it needs to be a safe that is attached to the ground with a certain type of lock, in a room with a certain type of lock. And like, the expenses add up, and governments get quite excited about being very protectionist about their controlled substances, to the point where it becomes unfeasible to actually, like, dispense a substance because it costs so much to renovate the building to have it. So it's almost like you might want to, with this kind of medical model you propose, get ahead of all that kind of hyperventilating around how to store it, and just like stipulate, if there's like a little information thing to stipulate, you know, stored in a locked box, meets the requirements of the International Control Conventions, you know, drug control conventions, or I don't know, just a way to like tap that before anybody decides to escalate up to the high heaven. Interestingly, I went straight to the privacy issue like Steve did when I played the game, and they're like, "Could I have your ID?" And I was like, "I would prefer not." And at which point, like, she explained, and I also wondered whether there might be different versions of the policy, one where you simply provide your ID to prove your age, and another where you provide your ID and there's a register, because there could be a split there arguably as well. You know, you provide your ID to buy alcohol, but you don't go on a register. Just a thought. And then one final thing, Steve, just to play the devil's advocate here, given the level of knowledge of drugs in the general population, I do think you should show the pill. You know, God knows what people kind of imagine up with like crazy media stories. I think it's really great to show a very benign looking little pill.
Okay, put the pills out.
And we made sure that in the pharmacy, the pill looks sort of boring, like it's a medicine. In the other environments, the pills will look more amazing and we have colors and shapes and stuff. But in the pharmacy, not so, as Transform also mentioned in the book. Yeah, but it's very interesting. I think we can think about implementing that. We were thinking about the registration only in the pharmacy. Now, honestly, I don't remember, but still, Steve will know if we did that, because that's how Transform recommends in the pharmacy setting. But we were thinking in the other settings that wouldn't be the case, and maybe not even the ID, or I don't know, in a party. If you have to show an ID, but we can explore that as well in the pharmacy.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm curious, any other reactions? Go ahead, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was one of the big debates we had within Transform and within the book, was about rationing, and you know, because it's relatively easy to ration sales per purchase, as you've done. So you could only buy 1 pill or 2 pill or whatever, a certain number of milligrams for personal use per purchase. The question was, if you wanted to ration sales over a period of time, over a week or a month or whatever, you would need to have some kind of registering system, a bit like we do with pharmaceutical or prescribed drugs that are often connected on a sort of national database. And that does just raise a lot of issues around excluding certain people, marginalized populations who might not want to register, or people who use drugs who are anxious about registering. And I think that given those concerns, you know, about and just wider concerns about state surveillance, given those concerns, I think the bar that you would need to cross, the threshold to implement the registry system, would be quite high. I don't think I don't think I would write it off completely, but I think you've got to make a pretty strong justification. So we were kind of ambivalent about, we kind of came down against it, but we sort of said, well, maybe there are certain situations, for example, if you were having a pilot model, and there would be a lot of sort of kind of political concerns around it, maybe you could justify it within a sort of pilot model. But I think in the longer term, the idea of having to register to buy something like MDMA, at least, I think is going to be problematic. I mean, I'm not saying take it out of the model. I think it's good to show it in the model how those things would work, because part of this is about reassuring people who don't understand it, and having a more regulated, maybe arguably more intrusive system might have a political benefit at this stage. But I think in the longer term, the idea of registries is something we'd certainly want to move away from. But yeah, so it's an interesting debate there, and I think if you are going to have a registry system, you need to justify it, and whether MDMA sales meets that threshold, I'm not sure. Be interested to know what anyone else thinks about that.
Yeah, I see Colleen's has a hand up.
Thank you. So I have to start this by saying I don't like video games, and I'm not good at them. And they really, yeah, I'm you know, of that age where I missed out on all that. So, but I actually found it really simple to use, and I love the graphics. I thought they were really wonderful. And you know, what I was thinking is that it would be great to have this at like a booth where people can go in and then use the game and walk around. So, you know, for example, at the AIDS conference in Mexico a couple of years ago, I took a shack from South Africa. There was an artist who built this shack out of all the materials that people use to live in South Africa who have like drug-resistant TB. And we had everybody at the conference, they actually had to go through the whole shack in order to go through to the other exhibits. And I'm wondering if we can't have something like this for parliamentarians, and, you know, have them go through the game and see what it looks like. And I'm thinking that Unite parliamentarians, because they have, the Unite group has access to all of them, it might be a great opportunity to sort of, you know, work with them and see how you can actually get this out to parliamentarians and get them to go through it with you, like you did at this session, and introduce them to it so that they can maybe get through, you know, that fear hump as to what it could look like. But that might be a really interesting way to go. And then wherever you can, you know, in different countries, if you can have them. So for example, we took the shack to Australia, and every parliamentarian, we put it in government house, in parliament, and everyone had to actually go through it to get into the Houses of Parliament. So they were kind of forced to look at it. And so if there's some way that you can think of how, you know, that could work in different parliaments, or whatever it is. But yeah, I think that way to sort of really get people's attention and get them to understand. Thank you.
Thanks. That's a super interesting idea. I don't know if Mac, I don't know if you want to comment on that, because currently there are some negotiations going on to do something in Utrecht also with that.
Yeah, correct. Well, on the point of involving politicians, we're trying to, let's say, motivate our Ministry of Health to see if they can bring this to the CND. That's a bit out there and ambitious, but let's see, they were open to the idea. And of course, we can share once it's a final version, we can share and make sure that people engage with this. And as Rafa mentioned, we really want to bring this into sort of a physical pop-up experience as well. So that's sort of the plan. Once we are able to launch the final version of the game, we're hoping that we also have a physical pop-up where we build the 3 different sets. So this pharmacy, party setting, and more like a smart shop as we have in the Netherlands, or a shop, so that people can actually engage live with this. So then we have an online and a physical component. And that would be, I think, really interesting in terms of, you know, also stirring politicians, at least here in the Netherlands, and to see if we can bring them over to the site, have them engage with this, and see if we can influence their thinking a little bit. And also, just to add, I find it an interesting discussion about privacy, of course. And of course, we would be in favor of, you know, people not registering at all. But that's, I think, also a topic that is interesting to test with the general public. And I suspect that users would never want to register, but maybe, you know, if you're a concerned parent or a politician or whatever, you would want to do that. So that's interesting to sort of, you know, some of those points are interesting to stir the discussion a bit, and will be cool if we have the 3 different sets where you can compare, and hopefully, bring people to discuss what would be the sweet spot, right? So that's a bit the idea. Over to you, Rafa.
I don't know if I'm actually thinking, how long do we have? I think we are at the end of the session somehow. HRI, please help. I forgot how much time we have.
You have come to the end of the session as scheduled. You're welcome to take 5-10 minutes more if there's more discussion to be had, but then isn't starting until 12, so you're okay.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so I would say a last round of impressions, if anyone would like to share with us your impressions, suggestions, questions. We are very much willing to know what you thought.
Rafaela, what's the timeline for the game going public? Do you know?
now I'm looking at Luca. I think it's March next year, right? No, mid next year.
So I think in 10 weeks, the game should be finished as a product by itself.
Yeah, so
I think it's safe to say that you will be able to keep using the link to play, to test the game out. Feel free to share it as well. And in 10 weeks, it should be an actual finished product that will be the final game as it is. And then it will be made public in different ways. I believe Poppi is working on an exhibition in Utrecht as a first step, but that's more Rafaela's expertise.
Yeah, I know, but it's so more or less that next year, let's say spring, it should be blooming.
Rafaela, there's one other question or discussion point really, is that is there an issue around I don't know what you would call it, maybe MDMA exceptionalism, that we would have these shops just for MDMA? You know, I think, you know, the use of MDMA does fit within a wider drug using culture. Do we anticipate that these types of outlets could be selling other drugs as well? So maybe magic mushrooms, or maybe cannabis, or maybe, I don't know, other sort of stimulant or party drugs. And if we did have other drugs for sale, maybe this is too complicated for this discussion, which I appreciate we're kind of winding up anyway, but I think it's something to think about. You know, some people don't want to use MDMA, they want to use amphetamines or cocaine or cathinones or something else, or magic mushrooms. And I just wonder if, you know, would we anticipate this being a useful model for, you know, personal doses, personal use of other recreational drugs used sort of in the party scene? Because I mean, this I mean, I guess the thing about MDMA is it is, because it's doesn't really have any functional uses like amphetamines or cocaine does to some extent, and it also isn't really associated with you know, dependent use or sort of compulsive use by the nature of its effects. It is fairly limited to recreational use and party settings, or I mean, yes, there are therapeutic uses and some people use it for other things, but generally that's where most of the market is. I wonder whether this model would work for other drugs as well, or whether so I'm just thinking aloud here about, you know, how are we seeing it within the broader trajectory of drug law reform and regulation of other drugs? And if other drugs were legalized and regulated, how would these models fit, overlap or not with that? Or is that too big a complicated question?
I do. I think I do think, I mean, you provide a lot in the book about how other models could go. I was here thinking, I think now, because there are also already so many decisions we have to make for these three possible scenes, and all requires like some artist production and some background modeling. And so we were focusing more on MDMA. I was thinking if we could potentially include other drugs, maybe in the other scenes, not the pharmacy. I think this is some discussion we have to take internally, because this probably will have a lot of consequences for the programming of the game as well. But I see opportunities for future games, I think. Maybe now it would be interesting to focus on MDMA, focus on one drug only. I think the idea that we started was because of what Max said, also because these discussions are quite lively in the Netherlands. There's a think tank thinking about regulation, and well, your book was out and others have been talking about it. So we focus on this specific drug. Also, if we think maybe it's sort of is an easier way to start up the debate. But I think we can think about next ones. Yeah, maybe for,
I mean, I think it's
another.
I think it's a brilliant tool. It's a brilliant tool for getting people talking and thinking about this stuff. And if people are having those conversations about how we regulate MDMA and other drugs, rather than if we should or not, then I think I'm happy. That's where the debate needs to be.
Yeah, I agree with what you guys are saying. I think from my perspective also, this is a first step to create awareness that actually this is a policy choice that we have, right? And that we can influence that. And that by making such choices that you actually get more control over you know, drug consumption, or at least the production of it. So the raising awareness is one, I think, goal of this, and in particular also with the physical pop-up. And then, you know, to test this with the general public to see what they would find acceptable is also a very interesting sort of research angle that we want to address, where, you know, the general public is still new to this concept. So to, you know, make them engage with it and see if we can generate a bit of a, let's say, social movement that might be interested in this idea. Hopefully that will result to more debate, and then also to take into account other substances and see into, you know, whether we can improve the system there as well. So I hope it's a first step, at least in the public debate, and of course with the idea to elaborate that with other substances as well.
Thanks, Mac. Well, I think we should be wrapping up, like we are already almost 10 minutes beyond time. Don't know if anyone has any itchy comment or question. No? If not, thank you so much for being here, for watching the game with us, for giving us feedback on the game, and also if you still have the link, so if you want to play with it, if you want to give us feedback, and via the game also, something you haven't spoken here, but you can give us feedback via the last questions in the game. If you have doubts, you want to talk to us, please feel free to reach out, and hope to see you soon in another opportunity.
Thank you, Rafa. Bye, everyone.
Yes, thanks everyone. Bye bye.
Great stuff.